Hey everybody, welcome to the first edition of Feed Your Fantasy. It's week 13 and let's get ready for the playoff push. Today I'm going to be recapping the Thursday night football game and going over all of the game previews for this weekend's football game. Hopefully it gives you an edge to get inside the playoffs. So let's get right into it. First, Thursday night. So the Cowboys get a much needed win to keep their playoff hopes alive, winning 38-14 against the Washington Redskins. Now, on the Cowboys side of things, it's a glass half full. You kind of won. You won pretty handily, but let's look back at the actual production of the Cowboys. So the Cowboys running game finally looked like the running game that we're used to seeing from the Cowboys. They had over 160 yards rushing total. Alfred Morris was the workhorse, got the majority of the carries. Ended up getting over 120 yards and a touchdown, which we've been finally waiting for him to put up the numbers that we were expecting. Not so much Zeke-like, but something replaceable to that. And we finally got it this week. Maybe a little too late, but it's good for the Cowboys in the sense that they finally got something going. But on the passing side of things, Dak again did not have a good passing game. He threw for only a total of 102 yards total in the game. Now, he did have 2 touchdowns and 0 turnovers, which is a big improvement over the last 3 games. But do you guys really think that the Cowboys can win in much more competitive games against much better teams? I personally don't think so. I just don't think that the Cowboys putting up the numbers that they did on Thursday, aren't going to be able to keep up with teams like the Philadelphia Eagles that they have to play later on this season. So, it's great for the Cowboys that they won. Bad that, it still doesn't look like a complete offensive performance that you guys need in order to move forward. Now, the other fantasy relevant player on the Dallas Cowboys is Dez Bryant. Now, Dez Bryant had the best game he's had since week 7, and he still has yet to reach a game over 75 yards in a game. So, Dez, to me, even though, he had a decent game, he put up 17 PPR fantasy points, is still touchdown dependent and hard to trust, especially if Dak can't put up higher passing yardage totals. Now, Jason Witten did score, didn't have a big game either. This passing attack, honestly, is one that you kind of want to stay away from for right now. Even Dez, to me, is a flex play at best. Now, when it comes to the Washington Redskins, you have to feel bad for them. You have to feel bad for the Washington Redskins, especially their fans, because they just keep getting injured, and it's basically a rotating carousel of players at all the major positions. Offensive line, they've had over 20 different line combinations, which is not good for Kirk Cousins and this run game. And to compound the injury issues, they just caught a case of the dropsies on Thursday. That entire first half was they just couldn't hold on to the ball. They either fumbled the ball with Jamison Crowder, they had a bunch of major drops, Dotson having a big drop to keep a drive alive, and Kirk Cousins also had a fumble as well in the first half, and things just snowballed from there. They just could not get anything going, and players just continued to keep getting injured. And, the offensive line is just, it's tough to beat Kirk Cousins, which, you know, fantasy numbers wise, it was a below average game for him. But a lot of that I don't think was personally his fault. He did have one of those interceptions, which was a catch basically, but Jamison Crowder dropped the ball, or technically it went through his hands and into a defender's. So that you can't really put on him. And the strip sacks, you know, he was under siege the entire game. Like, what are you gonna do? Like he's trying to make plays and he gets sacked, and yes, he does need to hold on to the ball a little bit more, but he's trying to get something going for his team, and ended up coughing up the ball twice. Now, I do think that down the road he is going to have better games ahead. I don't think that this is a trend. I think this is, just kind of a one-time thing. He hasn't really been too good in primetime games, especially on Thursday or Monday nights. So that may, if that's a concern, I don't think that they have too many other primetime games going forward. Now, with the specialty players, the receivers, the running backs in this game, it was frustrating. Jamison Crowder, like I said, not only fumbled the ball, but had a drop ball that turned into an interception and almost had a second fumble. Luckily, it wasn't overturned, which honestly I thought was kind of shaky. I thought it was a fumble myself, but they didn't end up overturning it to being a fumble. But that was honestly the worst half of football that I've seen Jamison Crowder play in his entire career. Now, he did have a decent game. The -2 for the fumble didn't help anybody. But going forward, I do think in PPR leagues, he is a wide receiver 3 with some upside. Now, the player that did have the best game was Grant, the wide receiver. He had the best game of all the Washington Redskins with 5 receptions, 76 yards on 9 targets, and a touchdown. Now, even though he did score 2 out of his last 3 games, he is an extremely risky flex play for me. You have to be kind of desperate in order to input him into your lineup until we see a little bit more consistency, because it was a up game and then it was a down game and now it's an up game. We need to see a little bit more consistency before we can actually trust this production. And the most frustrating out of all of them is Josh Doxson. Honestly, like, he's the most frustrating pass catcher on this team, because you can clearly see he is the most talented receiver in this group. But for whatever reason, he just has an issue with catching the football. He drops passes that he shouldn't. And he's also not getting the type of volume you would expect a very talented receiver like himself to get. He's only getting upwards of 3, 4, 5 touches at most. And honestly, that's just not enough to put him in the wide receiver 2 conversation. Now, he has, some silver lining here. He is a little touchdown dependent, but he has put up double-digit points in 3 of his three straight games. So he is in the flex conversation, and if you need to start him, you can. It's a little risky, but hopefully Kirk Cousins finds a way to get him the ball more, because he can make plays. It's just not happening right now. A lot of that is very similar to what Corey Davis is going through in Tennessee, but we'll get to that later. Now, also, Samaje Perine didn't have an awesome game, but I'm not too worried about him. Honestly, I still think that he's in the running back 2 conversation. And a game flow really kind of dictated a lot that he didn't get as many touches as you would expect. But moving forward, he is the workhorse. He is going to get the majority of the touches. Still keep Perine on your team and in your lineups. Better days are ahead for him. But as far as tight ends go, I'm off that train for the Washington Redskins. This is a team that you could have usually counted on for consistent tight end production, and it just hasn't been there. They have just seemed to fade out of the picture, and with Jordan Reed just not healthy again, what's new with him? But Niles Paul and Vernon Davis have just completely dropped off the map. And a lot of that may be to the fact that they're keeping their tight ends in to help their offensive line block, which is understandable because they can't block anybody. That honestly just may be what it is, but they're just not productive right now. So to me, you have to keep any Washington tight end off your lineup if at all possible. Now, off of the Thursday night game, I know a lot of you guys are pushing into the final stretch here of the fantasy playoffs, and for me, I'm in a total of 6 leagues altogether. That may seem like a lot to you guys, but I've been playing fantasy football for almost 10 years now. So at first, I was only playing 1 or 2, but now that I've gotten the hang of things and have really, dove in, and this has become my passion, I've upped the amount of leagues that I'm in. And out of the 6 right now, currently, I'm actually locked in already to a playoff spot in 5 out of the 6. Now, in that last one, though, I actually need to win the last 2 games because my playoffs in that league don't start till week 15. Week 13 and 14, I absolutely need a win in that in both weeks to get into the playoffs, and a little bit of help. I do need one of the 2 teams ahead of me to at least lose 1 game. So, really pushing for that one. Now, a lot of you guys have, already clinched your playoff berth, or you're fighting for your playoff berth, or you've been eliminated. But if you have been eliminated, one of my pet peeves is play it all the way through. Set your lineups and keep the integrity of your league. It keeps things competitive and, the trash talk alive, because that's one thing that obviously a lot of fantasy players like to do is trash talk. And I'm one of them. I like to trash talk a little bit, and if you can keep things competitive, it makes things a lot more fun for not just this league, but looking forward to your leagues in the future. It'll entice people to stay involved. And as the great Herm Edwards once said, you play to win the game. So let's go ahead and do the game previews for this weekend. And we're going to jump right in to the Titans and the Texans. Now, me personally, been a Titans fan for as long as I can remember. I've been a Titans fan basically since they were the Oilers. Now, with the Titans, I could be a little bit biased, but I'm not gonna be, because as much as I love my Titans and love the fact that they are winning and fighting for a playoff spot, there's a lot of things just not right now. And at the beginning of the fantasy football season, you would have expected that this team was going to be one of the fantasy relevant teams in general at all positions: quarterback, running back, wide receiver, tight end, which, well, at tight end they still are, because Delaney Walker is the man. He's Mr. Consistent, definitely a starter in all formats. But this team just, for whatever reason, hasn't put it together. And a lot of it has to do with Marcus Mariota. He's just not playing well. And even though I have the utmost confidence in him as my team's franchise quarterback, he just doesn't look good right now. Whether it's just he's not 100% or he's lost a little bit of confidence, it's a trickle down. And the wide receivers right now, the only wide receiver you can really trust on the team is Rashard Matthews. You know, he's been the only one that has been able to find consistent fantasy relevance on that wide receiving core. And Corey Davis and Eric Decker just really haven't been productive consistently. And we're just waiting for Corey Davis to just absolutely break out and give us what we're all looking for in the first round, fifth pick in the draft. You know, he's got all the talent in the world. He just needs the volume and needs the opportunity. You know, and right now he's not getting it. So hopefully that'll start turning around as the team approaches the final stretch. Hopefully they figure things out. Now, when it comes to the running backs, I can't even tell you what's going on with them because DeMarco Murray and Henry have really become a true work split, which you would have never thought that it would have just been straight down the middle, but you can't get a read on who's going to have the better game. DeMarco Murray is completely 100% touchdown dependent. He can't he's not getting the yardage. His explosiveness is pretty much gone, and I'm pretty much attributing that to his injury just not being at 100%. He just doesn't have the same burst. And Henry has been the better back to the eye test and production wise. He has all the talent in the world, and you can just see like he's ready for that workload. But they right now just want to a work split. So, right now it's kind of hard to trust either one of them. I would put them in the category of the flex conversation. And I know a lot of you guys have drafted DeMarco Murray to be either your RB2 or your flex, but right now he's a flex at best. I mean, you got to kind of temper your expectations with him because if he doesn't score, he is not having a good game. Now, on the Texans side of things, you're obviously going to start DeAndre Hopkins. Hashtag analysis. Like, he's a no-brainer. Like, don't worry about him. He is matchup proof. Now, you're probably also going to have to start Lamar Miller based on your roster construction, but this is not the best matchup for him. The Titans have allowed the fewest runs over 15 yards in the league and have been allowing less than 3 yards per carry. So I get it if you have to start him, but just temper your expectations. I don't expect him to have a huge game. Will Fuller, the wide receiver, has been officially ruled out again. So that means more run for Ellington and Braxton Miller. They're complete long shots to me. For fantasy purposes, they are good football players and are going to have some kind of production, but I don't think it's enough to keep them in your flex spot. I would say roster Ellington for now until Will Fuller comes back, but outside of that, I don't see how you can play them. And I can't believe I'm saying this, but I think Savage can have a decent game, and I think he is a decent streaming option. And damn, that is painful to say because the Titans defense, again, as much as I love my team, they are vulnerable to the pass, and that leaves the door a little bit open for them. Especially having DeAndre Hopkins on your side, you can have a decent game. Now, as for my pick for this game, I'm of course going to take the Titans. That's my team. I can't pick against them. Now, moving on to the Vikings and the Falcons, which I believe is going to be one of the better games this week. On the Vikings side of things, must starts. I actually think Case Keenum is in that conversation now. As long as he's going to be the starter, I don't see how you can sit him. Like, he has just been fantasy productive since he's gotten the job. Like he's been consistent and he's just got a real connection with Adam Thielen and Stephon Diggs. He is, to me, a top 10 quarterback moving forward into the playoffs. Now, of course, you're going to start, like I said, Case Keenum, Adam Thielen, of course, Travis Rudolph, Latavius Murray, and with Stephon Diggs and McKinnon, I think they're solid options as your flex. Between Latavius Murray and McKinnon, I think Latavius Murray has taken over that RB1 spot for them. He's just gotten more volume. Like, and the fact that the Vikings have been up in a lot of these games also plays into that. But McKinnon isn't getting the touches he was before. So you have to downgrade him a little bit, especially if the Vikings are going to be up. They're not going to use McKinnon as much because he is the better pass catching back also. So I think that you kind of have to, keep him in mind as a flex and not so much as an RB2. Now, the the Falcons defense has been better as of late, but I don't think that it's to the point where you question whether or not you're starting your Vikings. Start them with confidence. They should have a great game. Now, on the Falcons side of things, which as of late, they're starting to heat up. And it's a good thing because, obviously Julio Jones, after his monster game, which he also had last year, him and Mo Sanu is pretty much the two wide receivers you want. Mo Sanu has been absolutely consistent. He is a RB2 and a high-end flex for the wide receivers. Now, with Matt Ryan, like I said, this offense is starting to heat up, but I think that going against the Vikings defense, which is one of the toughest in the league, he's going to get you the 15 to 18 points, because, it's the Falcons offense and they're going to try and put up points against these Vikings defense. I think he's going to have a touchdown or two, but I think his ceiling is lower this week due to the matchup. Now, Devonta Freeman has been cleared from the concussion protocol and has been practicing in full and has been reported that there will be no limitations on his workload. Now, what does that mean for not only Freeman, but for Coleman as well, who has filled in very nicely and had some good games as Freeman has been out? Will Coleman cut into Devonta Freeman's workload? Maybe. And I think a lot of the game flow will decide who will have the better game in this one. But I believe Freeman does find the end zone in this game. So I would fire him up as normal. But for Coleman, for me, I would have him on my bench until we see how Freeman responds from coming back from the concussion and see how they choose to split the touches. Now, in this game, my pick is the Vikings. It's going to be a tough matchup. It's going to be very close, but I think the Vikings are going to win this game. Now, on to the next game, which is the Patriots and the Buffalo Bills. Now, not really much to talk about when it comes to the Patriots. Obviously, you start Brady, you start Gronk, you start Brandon Cooks. And as far as the backfield, which has always been the mystery of the Patriots offense as to who is going to start, things are starting to get a little clearer. Right now, between Dion Lewis, Burkhead, James White, Michael Gilsley, you have two main running backs that you're starting right now. And that is Rex Burkhead and Dion Lewis. Both have been absolutely fantastic these last few games. And I believe that they are both rock solid RB2s moving forward. If you have both of them, they're kind of in the same situation where you can use both of them and not be afraid that their production won't be there. Kind of similar to the Saints, not as prolific, obviously, but they're in the same situation where you can start both of them and be confident that they will provide you the points that you need. Now, James White, on the other hand, which, Super Bowl MVP, just right now, his touches and his snap counts have dramatically gone down. And until further notice, he's got to ride your bench, and if you need a roster spot, I can understand if you got to drop him. But, over the past few weeks, he's just not getting the volume. And a lot of that, I'm sure, has to do with the game flow. The Patriots have been up and haven't really needed to be in comeback mode and pass happy as much. So I do think that plays a factor into it. But as of now, he is a dart throw. Unless there's an injury or, again, game flow dictates them passing more, James White has to be on your bench. Now, as for the Bills, in my belief, I just don't see how the Bills can win this game. I think that there's going to actually be a lot of junk time. I think that they're going to be coming from behind. So there are going to be plenty of passes to go around, which means I think there is going to be an uptick in production for Tyrod Taylor, Zay Jones, and Charles Clay. Now, Zay Jones, from the Bills coaching staff, sound like they have a lot more confidence in him now and trust in him after a rough first half of the season, where going into the season we thought Zay Jones might actually have a chance of being rookie of the year because of the fact that he has the opportunity and a good quarterback that can get him the ball. But that just hadn't panned out. But over the last few games, he has been putting up solid numbers, and I do think that he also will have a decent game here. Now, for me, I believe that the best pass catcher that's going to have the biggest game this week, I think, is Charles Clay, the tight end. And since he's been back from injury, he's looked better and better every week moving forward. His catches, his yardage, and his usage have gone up all 3 weeks. So what does that say to me? That means I think that week 4 of him coming back from injury, he's going to be the Charles Clay that we had at the beginning of the season, where he was getting you touchdowns, a big PPR tight end, getting a lot of catches, not so much the yardage, but getting the touchdowns and being the safety blanket to Tyrod Taylor that we all knew before. Now, if you're in a position where you kind of already projected to not be even close in your matchup and you just kind of need a long shot in this game or in general to play, I think a good spot you can look at is Deontay Thompson. He may be a good candidate to get one of those deep touchdowns. Even though the Patriots defense has played better as of late, they have been still vulnerable to some deep throws. So if you need a long shot play, like, just kind of shooting for the moon to help you get into the matchup, you might look here. Now, when it comes to Kelvin Benjamin, he has a torn meniscus and has already been ruled out for this week. They are considering him day to day, which I don't see how. You got a torn meniscus, it's going to be hard for you to play. But from the Bills head coach Sean McDermott, he does have a shot to play next week. I don't know how much you can trust him in any format. Aside from the injury aspect of it and possibly injuring himself even further, it's a player on a new team still getting acclimated to the team, the playbook, the quarterback. Nothing really shows me that you can really rely on him moving forward in the fantasy playoffs. So if you have him, if you plan on keeping him, I don't think you can start him at all right now. And obviously, if you didn't catch my pick for this game, I'm picking the Patriots. Now, for the 49ers and Bears game, this the best matchup of the week. Yeah, right. So it's good to see Jimmy G, honestly, actually get a start, for the 49ers. I do think that he is. I do think that he is the franchise quarterback for the 49ers moving forward. And apologize for that. Got airplanes flying through the airport not too far from here. But anyway, I digress. So it's going to be, great to see what the hype is all about, and see what this 49ers offense may look like. But right now, I think the only must start on the 49ers is Carlos Hyde, and that really hasn't changed all season. I do think that with Jimmy G at quarterback, I think that, Goodwin and Kittle, George Kittle, the tight end, could have some uptick in production, but right now they're all flyers to me until we can see the efficiency and how well this offense moves the ball with Jimmy G at quarterback. It's kind of hard to say, and we don't know who he's gonna favor out there. Like, who is he gonna have as his favorite target? We kind of need to see what that looks like. But until then, I think Carlos Hyde is the only must start. Now, for the Bears, they're a lot like the 49ers, honestly. The only must start you have is Jordan Howard. And, going against this 49ers defense, which has been soft against the run, he's an easy RB1 for me. Now, Mr. Trubisky, it's nice to see that he's starting to develop and that he's, they're letting him throw the ball more. And he is developing a good chemistry with Dontrell Inman, the wide receiver. I can see Inman being the only other player you would consider as a possible flex play. Everyone else, not even really in the conversation until we see it on the field, as far as the pass catchers. As far as the pick for this game, I honestly think that the 49ers will win this game. I think they will play inspired football with their new franchise quarterback on the field. So I think that they have a good shot at winning this one. The next game, Packers and the Buccaneers. Well, on the injury front, Jameis Winston has been cleared to play, and he will be starting this Sunday, which I'm sure the Buccaneers are happy about. Even though Fitzmagic, Ryan Fitzpatrick, played decent and he did win a game. I'm sure Mike Evans, Deshaun Jackson, and most of all Cameron Brate are the most happy to see Jameis Winston back. Now, we don't know how Winston's going to be, if he'll be okay, if he can get through the game. But if he can get through a game, I think Brate will be the one that benefits the most. Cameron Brate has just absolutely disappeared when Jameis Winston is not on the field. And Cameron Brate is Jameis Winston's favorite target to go to in the red zone. So I think that if Jameis Winston plays even just average, I think Cameron Brate could have a good game and come back to the fantasy relevant players at tight end. Now, on the other injury front, Doug Martin has been ruled out, so that possibly means more touches for Jacquizz Rodgers. Now, this running game has not been good all season. They just haven't been good. And even when Jacquizz Rodgers did start early in the season during Doug Martin's suspension, he didn't really do much with it. So maybe Jameis Winston being back opens up some running lanes because they can't stack the box. But right now, Jacquizz Rodgers to me is a flex play at best. If you can avoid playing him, I probably would, because I do think the Buccaneers will be down in this game. I think they're gonna have to abandon the run relatively early. So right now, the only ones I would consider starting are obviously Mike Evans, Deshaun Jackson, and Cameron Brate. As long as Jameis Winston's the quarterback, I would start Cameron Brate. And you might have to start him obviously either by default or, you know, based off your team construction. Jacquizz Rodgers would be a decent streaming option. But now, when it comes to the Packers, things have gotten a little bit more interesting. Let's be honest. Brett Hundley, since taking over for Aaron Rodgers, has not looked good, but it looks like he's got some QB swag going on him now. Like he played well. Like he played like a real NFL quarterback against the Steelers, which, let's be honest, none of us thought that he would do that, because the week prior they got shut out by the Baltimore Ravens and he had 4 turnovers. So it's nice to see that Brett Hundley does have some NFL, promise, and he can fill in for Aaron Rodgers. And I also do think that against a terrible, terrible, terrible Buccaneers defense, which is not only bad but decimated by injuries, Brett Hundley is a decent streaming option. I honestly think that he's probably one of the better ones this week. And if you have a QB that's struggling, like Marcus Mariota or Alex Smith, Brett Hundley is a good option there if he's still available in your league. Now, as far as the skill positions, Davante Adams is probably the only wide receiver on the Packers right now that you can absolutely trust from game to game. It looks like Brett Hundley's just only got eyes for Davante Adams for whatever reason. He just hasn't found consistency with any of the other wide receivers. Now, call me crazy, but I think that this might be a game where Jordy Nelson comes back to life. Since Aaron Rodgers is gone down with the collarbone injury, Jordy Nelson has just disappeared, and he's right now unstartable in pretty much all formats. And believe me, I have Jordy Nelson on a team, and because of the fact that Aaron Rodgers went down, he's one of the reasons why I went from 9-0 to 9-3, possibly going 9-4, because my top wide receiver just hasn't been the top wide receiver that you would expect. But I think that with Brett Hundley starting to gain some more confidence and going against a terrible secondary, like I said, this might be the game that Jordy Nelson actually puts up the points that you would expect Jordy Nelson to put up. I don't think that he's gonna blow the roof off the place, but this might be a spot where he actually scores a touchdown. Now, as far as when it comes to the running backs, Ty Montgomery has been placed on IR, and he won't be coming back for the rest of the season. So what that means is that Aaron Jones and Jamal Williams will be the 2 main running backs in this offense moving forward. Now, right now, Aaron Jones is questionable for this game. And after being limited in practice, he's going to be a game time decision. So what that means is that if Aaron Jones plays, I think on a limited basis, I think Jamal Williams is the running back to play regardless of whether or not Aaron Jones plays or not. Now, after this game, I think Aaron Jones is going to be the number 1 running back, and Jamal Adams will be the backup But until then, we'll see how that works out because I think that's going to end up turning into a split as well. We'll see what happens with that. But for this game, I got the Packers. I mean, I don't see how the Buccaneers really have a chance to win this game. I mean, of course, every NFL team has a chance, but it's the Buccaneers. They just have not looked good all season to give you any kind of confidence that they're going to go and beat the Packers. Now, another riveting game: the Broncos and the Dolphins. Both teams who have really underachieved this year, especially on the Broncos side. Uh, Trevor Simeon is starting this week. Paxton Lynch is out for 2 to 4 weeks with a high ankle sprain. Worth considering as a streaming option only because it's the Dolphins defense and you want to start everybody against the Dolphins defense. But what that means for the rest of the skill positions, I think that Demaryius Thomas and Emmanuel Sanders do have better games going forward because they have a more competent quarterback throwing them the ball. Let's be honest. I mean, they haven't had competent play at quarterback, which means their production was down. But I think that with Trevor Simeon back at the quarterback position, they could have some solid games moving forward. Now, as far as the running backs, stay away at all costs if you can, if possible. Now, if you are in a deeper league, a 14, 16 team league, if you had the choice of which running back to start, if you had to start one, I would say it'd be Devontae Booker. He's looked, better to the eye test, and his usage has gone up every week. And with the Broncos out of the playoff picture, they're going to want to see what they have in Booker moving forward, to see if they have a running back there. So I think that he's going to get a lot more touches and his usage will go up. Just unfortunate that this offense is not that good. So I think his scoring prospects are down. So, but I do think also the Broncos defense, which is also really underachieved considering where we drafted the Broncos defense at, they're a good streaming option because, let's face it, Jay Cutler's quarterback. You start the defense against Jay Cutler. Perfect segue, actually. Jay Cutler for the Dolphins, like I said, is back at quarterback. And because the offense has been absolutely terrible all season long, I don't expect him to break out against the Broncos. If you're in a 2 quarterback league, stay away from Cutler. He has only had one game this entire season throwing over 250 yards this entire year, and he's averaging 1 interception every game he has played. That is not good for your QB. So, as far as the wide receivers, though, it does change things a little bit for them. Obviously, Jarvis Landry must start, especially in PPR leagues. Don't even question that. Now, for the other 2 wide receivers, Kenny Stills and Devontae Parker, Devontae Parker has fallen off the face of the earth while Matt Moore has been quarterback. But when Jay Cutler is quarterback, that's his favorite target. So I think Devontae Parker may have a better matchup than you would think because of the fact that Talib has been suspended for this game. They have Chris Harris, and you're gonna have to choose. They're gonna have to choose if they're gonna put Chris Harris on Jarvis Landry or Devontae Parker. But the wide receivers could have a better matchup than you would think this upcoming game. Now, Kenny Stills, I think, is been reduced now to a flex play at best with Jay Cutler at quarterback. It just doesn't seem like he has a lot of chemistry with him, so you're going to have to downgrade him. Now, as far as the running backs go, Damian Williams has been ruled out for this game, which this now becomes the Drake show. Kenyon Drake. But honestly, this is a good matchup. and since the Broncos defense can be run on, and there's no competition for touches, like who else is there in that backfield? If it's not Damian Williams and Kenyon Drake, they literally have no one else. So I think that Kenyon Drake is going to get the bulk of the touches here in the backfield. And I don't think the game flow affects him that much because they use Drake in the passing game as well. So he's the player that can be used in all facets of this game, regardless of game flow. I see him as a good RB2 option. I am picking the Broncos, though, in this game. I think they have a better defense, and I think that they'll be able to move the ball against this Dolphins defense. Now, the Chiefs and the Jets. Now, the biggest mystery of the NFL season right now is the Kansas City Chiefs. Like, what has happened to them? And Alex Smith, you were so good, and you're just back to being bad. The only thing you were good at doing consistently is not turning the ball over, and you can't even do that right now. I'm not sure if he is someone you can trust. I don't know if it's whether the offensive line is just not playing well or if they just gotten too cute with the play calling. But I don't think you can start him right now until you can see this offense get back on track. And the same thing goes for Kareem Hunt. I think, though, from him, his struggles have been more of the offensive line. The offensive line just has not been productive, and they're just not getting the same push, which is not allowing Kareem Hunt to get past the line of scrimmage like he was, and that's cut into his production. And they've also taken him out of the passing game. Like they've implemented more of the other running backs to kind of take over the pass catching duties, but a lot of that has just really killed this offense. And you may not have a choice like me, because I have Kareem Hunt in a few leagues, and I don't have a choice. But you may just have to, run him out there again and just pray to God that Andy Reid just figures it out, and he gets his play calling back on track, and gets Kareem Hunt back in the end zone. Now, as far as the other two players on the Kansas City Chiefs that are fantasy relevant, Travis Kelce must start. Not worried about him. He's going to be productive. He's the best tight end in fantasy. Now, Tyreek Hill, I think he is a low-end wide receiver 2 flex play right now. He hasn't had a 100-yard game since week 7 and only has 2 touchdowns in that span. He's a big play waiting to happen, so you do have that aspect and that upside because you only need one to get the points that you need. But, he has averaged at least 14 fantasy points per game over the last 5, so at least you have some kind of floor. Just hasn't had the yardage. As far as the Jets go, Robbie Anderson, he has earned his spot as a must-start wide receiver, averaging over 18.6 fantasy points, a touchdown, and 82 yards and about 4.5 to 5 catches a game over the last 6 games. I think Josh McCown is just looking for him deep, and they've been connecting every single game. Now, in this matchup, the Chiefs have given up the most deep passes on the year. I think that's a good recipe for success. I think Robbie Anderson has another big game this game. Josh McCown is also on the radar as an every week starter and definitely the best streaming option if he is available to start this week. Now, he's been playing great football. I don't know how else to put it, but I don't think the Jets or anybody in the NFL really expected this from Josh McCown. He has played absolutely great football, pretty much all year, and I think that success continues again this week against a struggling Chiefs defense. As far as the running backs go, no thank you. Don't want anything to do with them. That is a three-way work split when everyone is healthy. And there's no indication who will have the better game, who's going to have the most touches, who's going to get the goal line work, who's going to get the passing down work. So I think all of them right now are low end flex options at best. And if you have to play one, good luck to you. Also, the other players on this team, Austin Safarian Jenkins and Jermaine Curse, are also other possible streaming options for you. If you need a replacement with a good matchup, this is a good place to look. Now, in this game, I don't have a whole lot of confidence in my pick, but I think I'm going to go with the Chiefs. I think hopefully they can get some things going and start getting back on track, and hold on to that one game lead over the San Diego Chargers in the AFC West. Now, the Colts and the Jaguars. Moving on to a game which I absolutely think is, to be honest, is going to be a blowout. And if you're considering starting any Colts player, please don't. I mean, it's a terrible matchup for all positions, with probably the exception of Jack Doyle. Sit everybody else. Like the T.Y. Hilton, all the wide receivers, the running backs. I know Frank Gore is always consistent, but I just don't see how you can start Frank Gore, especially with the improved run defense that the Jags have now with Marcel Darius there. Their run defense is completely different, and they are shutting people down. So, if the Colts, if you have players there, sit them if you can, because I just don't think that. I think they're going to struggle to score 7 points in this game. And as far as the Jags go, I can't believe I'm even saying this, but considering Blake Bortles as a streaming option, I think it's possible. I mean, he's been solid all year, and with his production on the ground, like he's running the ball a little bit more, so you do have a little bit of a higher floor. He's getting you 2, 3, 4 points on the ground, which is helping his numbers. But he's also limited to turnovers. He's not the turnover machine that we've grown to love. But if you need a fill-in option, I think that you could probably do worse at the position. So I would consider Blake Bortles as a possible streaming option. Now, Leonard Fournette has been completely removed from the injury report for the first time since Week 10. Now, he's been a full participant in practice all week. So I do expect him to have a monster game in this one. Now, after a tough matchup against Patrick Peterson, which, let's face it, every wide receiver that goes up against Patrick Peterson has a tough game. He's the best cornerback in the game right now. I think Marquise Lee is a wide receiver that will have the best game out of all the Jaguars wide receivers. Now, of course, and if you have the Jaguars defense, fire them up, no questions asked. This is a game where I expect the Jaguars to finish as a top 3 defense fantasy-wise this week. The Colts offense is just bad. So, I mean, obviously you would fire them every other week, but especially this week against the Colts, if you can play them in DFS and daily fantasy, do that as well. And I do believe the Jags have no problem winning this game. On to the next one. Let's see. We have the Lions and the Ravens. Now, I don't think this is a great matchup for the Lions, to be honest. Now, I probably would think a little bit differently if Matthew Stafford was healthy. Um, but in this matchup, I think Stafford is a QB2 right now. If you have another option, I would strongly consider using a different quarterback for this week, because he is dealing with the ankle injury, which was visibly bothering him in the last game. But he's gonna, he is gonna play. There's no question about that. But I think his mobility will be compromised, and this Ravens defense has just been excellent all year, and they have only allowed more than 14 points to a quarterback once this entire year. So every quarterback that has played against them, except one, has had more than 14 points. Especially if you're going to be fighting for a playoff spot, I think this is a good spot to look for a streaming option just for this week. As far as the wide receivers go, I think that they're also in for a tough matchup too, because the Ravens defense has been the third best defense against opposing wide receivers. So you may have to start them, which I understand because based off your roster construction, but I wouldn't expect too much from them. If I had to choose a wide receiver that would have a better game, my call would probably be Golden Tate, because he lines up in the slot most of the time. I think he would probably have the most points out of the wide receivers this week. As far as the running backs go, Amir Abdullah, it looks like he's going to be a game time decision. Even if he does play, I don't see how you can play any of the Lions running backs for that matter. They have struggled all year to run on the ground, and I think those struggles continue this week. On the other side of the ball, if you for the Ravens, I think the only players that you can really have any confidence in this game is Alex Collins, the running back, and Danny Woodhead, which I think Collins is a solid RB2 moving forward, regardless of matchup, because he is getting the running down work, and he just looks like the better running back on that team. Now, Danny Woodhead is getting. Oh, excuse me. Danny Woodhead is getting worked back into this offense, but when he is on the field, they are trying to get him the ball. So as the weeks go by, I believe his production will increase as well, and I think that he will continue to be a good flex option. I think down the road, you're going to see the Ravens possibly have more struggles on the offensive side of the ball, and they may have to play from behind, which if they're playing from behind, Danny Woodhead is going to rack up the points. For this week, I don't like or even see a good game for either Mike Wallace or Jeremy Maclin. To be honest with you, I think that they're both long shots for me. If I absolutely had to choose a Ravens wide receiver to play, it would probably be Mike Wallace because he has been playing better as of recent. But Flacco just gives nobody confidence that he can even put up average numbers for the receiving core to have any kind of fantasy relevance. I will be taking the Ravens, though, in this game because I do think that the Ravens defense actually comes up with a defensive score in this game. So I think that they have a good shot at winning this one. Now, the Browns versus the Chargers. I mean, this has been everyone's question throughout the fantasy universe. That, the biggest question is, how will Josh Gordon play in his debut? Now, to be honest, I think that this is more of an evaluation game for fantasy owners because I don't think that you can start him in any format. Maybe in a tournament DFS play, I can see that. Or if you just absolutely have no other choice than to start him, I just don't think that he's going to be a good option because this Chargers defense has been outstanding. And outside of the Jaguars defense, this has been the hottest defense in the league with a great secondary. So I don't expect a whole lot of production, even though Hugh Jackson, the Browns coach, said that he's got quote unquote big plans for him. I would love, I would absolutely love if Josh Gordon just went off and put up a ton of points, since I do own him in a few leagues. I just, it's hard to see him do that, especially since he hasn't played a game in years. And as for everyone else, Kaiser, I don't want any part of this week, especially against the Chargers defense. Like I said, they're one of the hottest defenses in the league, and that defensive line with Bosa and the rest of the guys there, they're gonna pick them apart, and that's gonna force turnovers, and I think the Chargers defense is probably gonna have a score in this one as well. Now, as far as the running backs go, Crowell has quietly been a lot better as of recent. I believe the game flow, though, will take him out of this game in particular. I think the game flow actually favors more of Duke Johnson Jr. I believe Duke Johnson is a solid RB2 flex play, with Crowell being a flex play at best in this one. When it comes to the receiving core, the tight ends, and any of the other wide receivers not named Josh Gordon, you got to wait until you see it on the field, and see more consistency from DeShone Kizer. So as far as the Browns go, it just doesn't look great in this one. Now, for the Chargers, start everyone. Hashtag analysis. But seriously, start, Phillip Rivers, Keenan Allen, Melvin Gordon, the defense, and I think Hunter Henry is starting to heat up as well, getting more volume and looks from Phillip Rivers. So I think you absolutely have to start him, especially since the Browns are terrible at defending the pass. Austin Eckler also, I think, is a viable flex option, because I think that this is going to be a blowout, and I think there's going to be a lot of junk time production that he will get once this game has reached out of hand. Now, Tyrell Williams and Travis Benjamin are also long shot flex plays for me in this one. And if you do need some kind of replacement, or again, if you need one of those long shot players to kind of shoot for the moon for points to get into a matchup and make sure that you stay competitive, you might want to look here, because these two have probably the best matchup out of all of the category of long shot fantasy players this week. And I think obviously Chargers are going to win, and I think they're going to win big. They're gonna probably have one of those games like they had against Buffalo a few weeks ago. They're just gonna put a clinic on it over there in Los Angeles, I should say. Next game is the Giants and the Raiders. Now, the Giants have been obviously a huge disappointment all year, with the only bright spots being the rookie Evan Ingram, Sterling Shepard, and Orleans Darkwa. They have been the best part of this offense, but who knows what this offense is going to even look like with Geno Smith at quarterback. And let me just say, that, getting off topic for a second here, what they did with Eli Manning after a subpar year, I understand, was just absolutely atrocious. Like, I understand if you want to evaluate what you have, quote unquote, according to Ben McAdoo, wanting to see what you have in Geno Smith and Webb at quarterback. If you really wanted to evaluate him, you guys would have traded him before the trade deadline on October 31st when your team was 1-6 going into your bye. Like that would have been the time to handle this at that time frame and not bench him mid-season when he has done a lot for this organization, bringing them 2 Super Bowls. It's a slap in the face. I don't know how else to put it, and I think that the Giants, it's just shameful that the Giants have handled things the way that they did. And I honestly really feel bad for Eli Manning, but I do hope that this is his last year. He can get out of New York and go to a team that he can win with. Now, if you can help it, getting back on the topic, if you can help it, the only player I would consider playing right now is Evan Ingram and also Sterling Shepard and Orleans Darkwa. Even though they are low-end options in each of their respective positions, it's just going to be tough for anyone to know what this offense is going to look like now that Geno Smith is at quarterback. For the Raiders, both Cooper and Crabtree are going to be out in this game due to injury for Cooper and suspension for Crabtree. So what does this mean for Derek Carr? I don't think it's all bad. Honestly, I do think that, since they are playing the Giants, I think the Giants are just going to quit on Ben McAdoo. And that's not to judge their character in any type of way. I just think that they lost confidence in their coach, to make the right decisions, and they are they're just not going to believe in the plan and his vision for the team. So I think that Derek Carr could have a decent game in this one. But I don't like his prospects as much as I would have if Crabtree and Cooper were both playing in this game. I do think, like I said, he has a decent game, but I don't think it's a no-brainer, must-start type of situation. Marshawn Lynch, beast mode, should get a really good workload in this one. I think this is actually the first game he will have his first 100-yard game as a Raider and finds the end zone in this one. So I do expect a big game from him. He's getting a lot more touches recently and has been productive with them. He's got 3 touchdowns in his last 3 games. So expect a good game from him. For the receivers, I think right now you're kind of looking at a good uptick for Jared Cook, Seth Roberts, and Cordell Patterson. The Giants are terrible at defending the tight end position, so I think that Jared Cook actually jumps into the tight end one conversation with the 2 wide receivers being flex options. I think Seth Roberts kind of steps into the Crabtree role as the possession receiver, and I think Patterson plays the Cooper role as the big play receiver. I will be taking the Raiders in this game. Shout out to Raider Nation. I know my cousins are out there right now going to see this game live. So hope they enjoy this game. On to the next one. Panthers versus the Saints for the battle of the NFC South Division lead. Should be also another great game to watch. A lot of good matchups this weekend. I don't think there's really a whole lot to even talk about when it comes to the Saints. You will start your usual players: Breeze, Alvin Kamara, Ingram, Michael Thomas, and I think Ted Ginn also is a good flex option, and in a revenge game for him, I think he finds the end zone as well. Also worth mentioning, Coby Fleener has been officially placed on injured reserve for what that's worth. I mean, he hasn't really been too productive. So expect Josh Hill to be the main tight end. But honestly, I would avoid this position on the Saints at all. I wouldn't play any of them. the tight end position in total out of the three players that they have just haven't been productive. So I would just stay away from them altogether if possible. Now, their quarterbacks are still ailing. Cornerbacks, just to clarify. So if they are a no go in this one, I would avoid also playing the Saints defense because the Saints defense has not been what it has been over the course of the season with these two cornerbacks out. They have looked very vulnerable, to say the least. So if they are not playing in this one, I would avoid playing the Saints defense as well. For the Panthers, you're obviously going to start Cam. You're going to start Devin Funches. Now, Christian McCaffrey comes into this game as a game time decision with a shoulder injury, but Coach Ron Rivera has said that he is optimistic that he will play. So if he does go, start him up as usual. Now, as for Greg Olsen, according to Ian Rappaport of the NFL Network, he has reported that he is expected to not play as a precautionary move. Nothing is wrong as far as integrity wise to the foot. They're just kind of taking it as a precautionary to have him more down the stretch moving forward. So it doesn't look like it's a long term issue. It looks like it's probably just going to be for this week, and you'll be able to use Greg Olsen starting next week in the fantasy playoffs. So for when it comes to this Sunday, Ed Dixon's worth a flyer. He has been productive when he is started for Greg Olsen. Also, I would say you could also take a flyer on Russell Shepard. As long as both of these cornerbacks are out for the Saints, Russell Shepard is also one of those players that you can look for as a long shot player to try and get you some extra fantasy points in your flex spot. Now, for the Rams and Cardinals, I mean, it looks good on one end. I mean, the Rams, this looks like a great matchup for them on both sides of the ball, to be honest. I would start all of your usual Rams, Todd Gurley, Cooper Kupp, even Watkins, although I do think that Watkins will have not have the kind of game he had last week because of Patrick Peterson. So I would consider him more as a flex play. But the other player of interest on this team, I think, would be Tyler Higbee as a tight end. Because of the matchup with Patrick Peterson and Watkins, they're going to have to look for other places to go with the ball. And especially in the red zone, I think you're going to see, if you're going to need a tight end, I think that you're going to see some decent production out of the Rams tight end, Tyler Higbee. And definitely start the defense in this one. I honestly, I don't expect Blaine Gabbert, even though he did play well against the Jags, which I think far exceeded anyone's expectations. I just can't trust that he's going to do it back-to-back weeks against two really good defenses. So I think that the Rams defense is a solid choice in this one as well. As far as the wide receivers on the Cardinals side, Larry Fitzgerald, I mean, what are you going to say? He's a must start regardless of matchup. You're going to fire him up regardless. So expect a good game from him. Also think that Adrian Peterson is definitely worth a flex consideration as well because the Rams defense is poor against the run. As much talent as they have on that defense, they're susceptible to the run. They're second to last in points allowed to fantasy running backs right now. So I anticipate a heavy dose of Adrian Peterson this game. I will be taking the LA Rams in this one. I don't think the Cardinals really have a chance, to be honest. Now, for the Sunday night game, Eagles versus Seahawks. this is the probably the matchup in the NFC at least that most people are going to be watching to see what happens. There are two division leaders who are fighting for top seed in the NFC. So honestly, I think there's not really a whole lot of questions on the studs on both sides. I mean, you're starting both quarterbacks, both wide receiver ones, and both tight ends. Wentz, Russell Wilson, Alshon Jeffrey, Doug Baldwin, Zach Ertz, and Jimmy Graham. I think those guys are no brainers, must start every week. But when it comes to the Eagles running back situation, not so much. Between Ajayi, Blunt, Clement, I think that Ajayi and Clement probably have a better game in this one. I actually think that the Eagles may be playing a little bit from behind in this one. I'm not saying they're going to blow it out, but I think they're going to play from behind for a little bit. So I think that game flow actually favors Ajayi and Clement more than it does Blunt. I think the game flow will take Blunt out of the equation. But who knows? Honestly, I mean these guys have truly actually split touches basically three ways, percentage wise. Touch, they're just splitting the ball, and whoever has the good game eventually just has the good game. But it's hard to trust, and it's kind of just a gut feeling right now as to who is going to be the better running back this upcoming game. If you can, I would avoid them if you could. I understand obviously if you can't, but if you had to start them, I would consider Ajayi and Clement as your two options there. And the Seahawks backfield is, just as bad as far as fantasy wise, trying to figure out who's gonna be the player. But the difference is they're just not productive. Mike Davis, who has been the best looking running back, is averaging 3 yards a carry. I mean, that's how bad it is, and that he looks like the best running back. So he's gonna get the best. He's gonna get the start. Lacey's gonna back him up, and McKissick is gonna get the passing down work. The Eagles' run defense is fantastic, so starting any of them, no, not really, not for me. But I do think that Paul Richardson is an interesting flex option here, since the Eagles can be exploited in their secondary. There's plenty of passes to go around for both of the receivers to eat in this one. So I think that I think this is going to be a high-scoring game, honestly. I think this is going to be a game where both teams are in the 30s. It's going to be a tough game, but I think the Seahawks actually win this game in a hard-fought game. I think the Russell Wilson leads the Seahawks to a game-winning drive in this one. Being in Seattle, I think Seattle pulls this one out. And for Monday Night Football, Steelers and Bengals. I think this is going to be a AFC North slugfest, like most of them are. I think it's going to be low scoring, hard hitting. On the Steelers side, fantasy owners don't want to see an addition late in the week. And that's right now what's happening to Antonio Brown. He was put on the injury report with a toe injury. In my opinion, he is the best wide receiver in this game, or in the game, period, in the NFL. So if he does get the green light, you fire him up regardless. Now, it does make you nervous because it is a Monday night game, and he was a late add to the injury report, like Juju Smith-Schuster was a few weeks ago with his hamstring. You don't like to see that. Especially even though they say it's minor and it's not a big deal, to fantasy owners it's a big deal because you have to then now make, plans for a possible replacement in case they decide not to go and start him. And historically, Brown hasn't had huge yardage games against the Bengals. The Bengals usually play him really, really tough. But like I said, regardless, you still start him. Now, if he is not starting, Juju Smith-Schuster and Martavius Bryant would then become viable wide receiver 2 options. And Juju Smith-Schuster does look on track to play in this one after his hamstring injury. You don't have a problem with Le'Veon Bell. He's a no-brainer. But Big Ben, we all know, there's Road Ben and there's Home Ben. You know, both of them put up very different numbers. And Road Ben, you know, has scored 16 points or less in 3 of his 6 starts on the road with 8 touchdowns and 5 turnovers in those games. So even though the Steelers' offense is starting to find their groove now offensively, it's hard to trust Ben on the road. I get it if you want to start him or bench him this week. For me, I think I would probably still start him as long as Antonio Brown is a go in this game. If he is not starting, I would not start Ben. But again, it's tough to make that call because this is a Monday night game. So you're going to have to kind of make that judgment ahead of time whether or not you're going to have to live with benching him or not. As for the Bengals, they're also another disappointing team this year. Extremely, extremely inefficient all season long on offense. Joe Mixon did have a breakout game last week, so I think that puts him in the conversation as in the category of a must start, along with AJ Green for this team. Everyone else, you're kind of playing Russian roulette with when it comes to Giovanni Bernard, Brandon LaFell, you know, all of the other skill position players just haven't shown any kind of consistency at all. And the same can be said for Andy Dalton. I mean, he has played better as of late. As of these last 3 weeks, he has put up, you know, over 15 points in each of the last 3 games. So I do consider him as a QB2. But for me, it's going to be tough against the tough Steelers defense. I will be picking the Steelers in this one. Now, that is it for me, everyone. I hope you guys enjoy your Week 13. Hopefully, you guys get into the playoffs. You know, hopefully this was somewhat helpful. This is not normally how I want to do my videos. You know, there was a technical issue where things got deleted. Unfortunately, I had to redo a video for you guys to see. But this upcoming week, there should be some more videos where I'm going to be debuting some segments that I think that you guys are going to like. So look out for those. So if you like the video, if you like the content, please go ahead, hit the like button, subscribe, and I will see you in the playoffs.